Hello and welcome. This video tutorial will show you how to take a model you've created in Softimage XSI5 and convert it so that it will work in the Star Wars Battlefront 2 game engine. This tutorial will only go over how to get a model that's already been created into the game, including proper hierarchy, hardpoints, shadow volume, low res mesh creation, and collision mesh creation, and a little bit of simple animation, as well as making sure all the animations work for all the different parts, so like the low res, collision, and shadow volume. First thing is first is dummy root creation. Now this is what tells the game how the model transverses in the world, as well as its point of rotation. You can see like where you would want to place it would normally be on something like this in the center between the wings, as you would want the pitch to go down from here relative where the engines are, as well as most craft are going to rotate in the center between the two wings and not somewhere down here, somewhere low. Now what we're going to do is just start by segmenting this up, because we're going to animate through ways of parent-child relationship and not using envelope weights, as they tend to take a little bit more game memory, and we're just going to do everything to try to optimize performance as best as possible. I'm going to start now by separating the wings. What I'm just going to do and just grow selection from there, make sure everything's selected. And what you can do on something like this is actually, oops, can't do that because I can't have those struts selected. Those are actually different. Those aren't going to rotate. I want everything that's going to rotate as part of one group. Can't forget these little guys that got under here. Alright, that should be everything for the wings. And the reason why I'm going to keep them, even though they're two different wings, I could keep them as one object, because they're going to be rotating along the same axis. They're not going to move differently from one another. They're going to move together. So I'm going to delete, and there we have the wings. And we'll rename that wings, and we'll do this as body. And those will pretty much be the only parts that will be animated for the takeoff, except for these things in here. I have these that are going to act as my ordnance launchers. It's kind of a design taken from the old X-Wing Alliance game, and it fit the old blueprint that I found for the model pretty well, so I kind of stuck with it rather than the little changes they made in episode 2 where they had them down there and really small. So I'm going to detach those as well. What I'm going to do with these is, let's hide this and separate that. So launcher right and launcher left. Okay, that should just about do it for the main parts that will be moving. Now next thing we're going to do here is go into here. I'm going to create some bones, some things for the parts of the mesh to follow for the animation. I'm just going to use simple nulls. What I'm going to do is have it snap to centers. And I'm going to create this one here. Now this one, it's going to be our ship bone. The reason why we have like one just for the ship, for the whole ship to rotate around, is because the way this thing sits flat when it's landed, and it rotates upright when it is taking off. But it's also good to make one even for one that doesn't do that, just because you won't want to use the dummy root as something, as like a bone type object. I mean, I suppose you could, but I've never tried it and I'd rather not test it. And then next we'll make another, and what this one will go, we'll snap it to here, but we'll move it down so that it's pretty much in the center of the so that they can rotate on the x-axis, the wings. And we'll get it right there. You can see there for my cylinder that is just about the center. And that one's just going to be wing bone. Real simple. And then create two more. And these will be for the ordnance launchers, and they'll have to have their own since they're going to move separate from one another, but they don't have to be anywhere special. This is along because they're going to be moving, they're going to be translating in worlds, so their real center doesn't even really matter as long as you just animate them to move in and out. We'll even just duplicate that one and go here and just negative. Pretty much mirrored in world. It's a little too much. There. We'll do right, and then launcher bone left. And now something that I like to do to keep everything more or less where you can tell what everything is, I'm going to change the icons on some of these. Just do that. That's the way I know these ones are going to be ones that will showing that they're going to be bones that are going to be used for rotation, and I'll just make these guys into, let's say, a box. And that way, when you look at things, let's see, oops, say you want to turn on X-ray mode to see everything, you'll be able to really tell what is what, judging by their origin as well as their symbols. Okay, now that that's created, I'm going to go ahead and start creating some of the hardpoints that'll be used to attach effects as well as to tell the game where laser effects and launcher effects will come from. Now, you can really do this in multiple ways. You can do as simple as making nulls and just placing them wherever you want, but I tend to like to make it so that I can tell apart the nulls from the bones from the hard points. I use geometry, and it's not a big deal since the game won't use the actual triangles from the geometry in the game. All it really takes is this, its transform information. That's all it uses. So you could make it have 10,000 triangles and it won't even matter for a hard point. You can even do the same with bones too, actually. you can make it so that bones are geometry rather than nulls, but there's really no point. I just do this to sort of make it easier to look at for the sake of organization, really. What I'm going to do is snap that to there. There we go. And go back to object, delete that little guy since it's really not necessary. And this is going to be, I'm going to use this much like the developers did as my main sort of shape that I'm going to be using for everything that I know is like a weapons kind of hard point. I'm just going to scale this down and freeze the scaling, and there we have it. Now, one thing about these is that the game will know to fire the weapon on the positive Z axis, this axis here. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees and then freeze rotation. I'm going to freeze the model to get rid of any construction history. And now it's set up correctly so that if this cone is pointing this way, it's going to fire this way. But I'm going to actually go back and rotate it back the way it was, because as it moves in game, it will know, the ship will rotate and it'll know to fire in the right direction once the ship is rotated in the direction it is meant to go. What I'm going to do here is just try to center that out the best I can. I obviously need to scale that down some. Get that right about there. You don't want it inside the actual mesh. Right about there should be good. Freeze scaling again and freeze the model. I'm going to do HP fire 1. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that and just duplicate it so that you can have multiples. Then take these two and duplicate them and go in and change their global transform to pretty much mirror them. And there we have the lasers now set up and ready. Now for the ordnance. It's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to duplicate that. Hide this so I can see a little better. Go back to this here and got HP fire 5. I'm going to attempt to snap this as close to the center as this is possible, even though it's got all these little holes on the texture where the missiles are supposed to come out of, but you'll never actually see that. I'll be using more than likely the kind of cluster missile effect that they have on the little droid fighter with a bunch of little blue missiles trailing from it. We'll just duplicate that one again. So it's not like you'll really see. You don't need one for each little one. It's just going to have 2 missile launchers pretty much, but each ordnance will be a cluster of missiles. There. We'll just unhide this, show it back up. And what I like to do to further keep things a little organized is go through and change the wire colors on certain things so that I know what is what. I can keep good track of everything that way too, just by looking at the Explorer view. It's not really necessary, but it's just something I like to do, especially when you have wireframe unshaded. You can really tell where everything is. And now, moving on, we're going to make the exhaust effect hardpoints. And these as well, what I like to do to just make things a little nice to look at. I'll take that, keep, and then change the bounding box to, where is it? Bounding box. Move center to bounding box. And now I have what will be my exhaust effect. And need to really remove the material from this. Don't worry about it later. I'm going to do the same thing for these two here. Center to bounding box. Go down there. What I'll do is actually need to freeze that, and I'll duplicate this one rather than making another. I'll just do that. Just duplicate it and kind of mirror it by changing the transform in the world. And there we have our 2 exhaust effects. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to change those to sort of match what they're going to be in game. They're going to be like kind of an orange color. Change that. And there. We have our 3 exhaust effects. I don't have to really worry about them having UV and texture information, because like I said, the game isn't going to use anything but their transform values, which I actually have to change here in a minute, because unlike the, or actually like the hardpoints used for weapons, rather than the z-axis, the positive z, it uses the negative z-axis to tell the game which direction to fire the exhaust effect. So what I'm going to do is change it to center, and let's see, -90. Freeze all these, because you can't have any, let's see, let's go into here. You can't have any construction history in here. And here I can actually delete my texture information so that these no longer look for a texture just by deleting their UV information. No model that you have can have any construction history in here. So I've got like that delete component operator inside of here, and I need everything in here other than if you're using envelope weights. That's the only thing you can really have in here. Otherwise, when you import it into the game, it's going to undo any sort of modeling construction history and more than likely just skew the model and just totally ruin it, and you're going to look at it and wonder why the heck everything looks the way it does. Let's see, like here, we'll just freeze all these. There we go. As well as the dummy root. And that's going to be it for like the basic hardpoints. You can make more for certain things like critical hit and like where sparks and flames are attached to, but as long as you get these basic ones in here, you can really just tell the game to attach it to the dummy root and then just go into the ODF file and change the offset in which it spawns. You can even do that actually with weapon hardpoints. You can actually don't even have to make any. You can use the dummy root and then say take these transform values right here and use them in the ODF to tell it to offset the attach point to here where this is. But that's a little too complicated for some people. They might get a little confused, and centering it out perfectly may take more than a few tries. You may be recompiling your model multiple times to try to get it right, and I don't think it really saves any sort of performance at all, so it kind of doesn't matter. Now what we're going to start doing here is setting up everything so that everything's in the proper hierarchy, and of course with dummy root being the main parent effector to everything in the game, everything starts there. We're going to go in and start letting these effects follow each one of the bones so that everything can move properly. What we're going to do is take all these as well as these. We're going to actually put them under the ship bone rather than following the body, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. We'll have the body under the ship bone and then the wings under the wing bone. Launcher left and launcher right, and we'll take all the bones, these three bones, put them under the ship bone and then the ship bone under the dummy root. And now we actually have everything where it should be at the moment. And right now we can actually start with just a simple animation. Now you don't really have to get too crazy on something like this. It just needs to take off and fly. I'm just going to change the frame count to something a little longer. That may not be accurate, but you can always go back and easily change it using some of the animation tools to actually stretch out the time frame in which everything lasts without actually having to go back and recreate any of the frames. But judging by most things, I kind of want these animations to play somewhat slowly, so I'm just going to give it a lot of frames since you have to stick to the same frame rate that the game uses. Now what we're going to start here, we're just going to make sure everything's kind of moving correctly to the parent-child relationship. We have that going the way it should be. what we'll do is, I don't know, let's take it out to like frame 150. Well, first we'll change this to 0. We need to make the base pose pretty much animation, and what that's going to be is the one that's going to loop over and over whenever it is on the ground and not doing anything. It actually needs that. And whenever you have hardpoints that are going to follow the model that actually need to move with it, they're going to be keyed like as if they're a bone, and they're pretty much going to behave a lot like a bone, except for the fact that they won't have any mesh underneath them that's following them. They'll be following the bone, but they actually need to have the same keyframes that their parent bone uses to move with them. And what we'll just do is set one for translation, one for rotation, go to frame 1 and do the same thing. And that's going to just be the base pose animation right there. And then for the takeoff, what we'll do is we'll animate the ship bone rather than the dummy root itself. And let's say we'll rotate it 90 degrees because it's going to do that as it takes off. And then take the wings right about here, or back a little bit. We want it to look a little lifelike. You know, we don't want it to... Oops, looks like I've got a little deal here. But luckily, since we're not dealing with envelope weights, we can go back and then merge these two together. There, fix that little problem there that I didn't notice before. Seems I didn't realize what I'd done there. And now, at about frame a little ways before here, just to make it look like everything's kind of moving. You know, nothing's too static the way it moves. It's about right about here. We'll start the wing opening animation. We'll go all the way up to our frame 200 here, and there we go. Let's see how that kind of looks. A bit static there, but in game it'll move a lot faster. And also, just a little ways before we actually take this. We'll change this here to open up pretty much right about there. Change both of these. What we'll do is then go to the end here, have this move out just enough so that the launcher the missiles will clear the body of the ship and not shoot itself. What do we got here? Let's copy that. So you can see I'm trying to make everything real symmetrical so that I don't have any problems with the way it moves, so that everything moves as it should, because, you know, it's a machine. It's not really a person. It doesn't have very fluid movements. It moves somewhat static. Let's check that out, see how that looks. Pretty decent. You know, I may go back and play with it a little bit later. And now for these, what I actually need to do with all these hard points is go through and just add a keyframe that follows there. Actually follows their the main bone, which ends at 150, not 200. If I don't do that, then they actually won't follow the bone, even though they're parented beneath it. I'm not sure why it does that exactly, but for the hard points to move properly, they need to be keyed. They need to have all the same keys that the bone that they're following has. There we have pretty much the basic takeoff animation done. What we can start doing is making little groups here. I like to do this for further organization as well, and we'll have hard points. And this is so that we can sort of change some effects so that we're not actually seeing them all the time or anything like that. And another thing is, I can pretty much guarantee you that no matter how many times you've done this, you'll pretty much never get it in-game exactly perfect the first time. You're always going to have to go back and make edits to small little things to get it working properly. And that's another reason why it's good to just keep everything as organized as possible, so that when you do need to go back, you can just select a certain group and just edit only certain things in there, and also just hiding things so that you can pretty much look at what you only need to look at the time. And we'll just do that for now. And then right there, so you pretty much have the main basic model pretty much moving and getting one step closer to being ready to be in game. Change this to bones, and then also you can make one for the main model as well. And that's it for the first basic setup of everything. The next couple of videos after this will go into detail about shadow volume, collision, low res, and then finally getting it into game, also as well as like ODF creation. And the main reason why you don't want to just go straight to game from here is because if you look at how many triangles this is, when you go to put it in game without a low res or shadow volume or collision mesh, the game will essentially just duplicate this pretty much 3 times to make up for each one of those 3 things. So you could see here 1, 2, 3. Now your game model would be 10,000 triangles, just because you didn't take the time to create a low resolution mesh so that the model can be viewed at a distance without, rendering too many polygons, as well as making a collision and shadow volume mesh so that the game won't be using your high detailed main mesh to calculate all those things for it.